In this video, I'd like to give you a quick tour and an overview of some of the different software and hardware that I use for teaching, making music, filming and recording. I've had a few questions about some of the gear which I use, and this is very much still a learning project for me. I'm learning as I go along, and I'm always trying to upgrade things and learn new things about how to get the best quality content, both in terms of the teaching and in terms of the production. So this is just an overview of what I like to use, because I did a video a while ago and a lot of people were asking for more specific examples of what I use for recording and video and things like that. So here's a quick studio tour. This is really just a spare bedroom in the house really, and there isn't that much space required to create a setup like this. And I think that if you're creative and if you know how to use these things well, then that is really more important than just having, you know, a fancy camera or a fancy interface or something like that. It's really knowing how to use them that gives you the best result, not necessarily having just a nice camera, because even with the camera which I've got, which I'll tell you about in a minute, I can use it a little bit, but there's still a lot more that I can do in regards to that. And similar, there's a lot more that I can do in regards to learning the DAW and things like that. So for me, I'm kind of, hesitant to, have too much money invested in gear that I can't use. So for me, I'll just kind of get something that I think is beginner level and really learn to master it before kind of getting like a, $4,000 camera and then knowing how to use one setting on it. So here's my studio tour. I hope you like it. And if you have any questions about anything, just drop me a comment and I'll happily get back to you. This is the main desk that I use for teaching, doing live lessons, Zoom workshops, things like that. The main computer which I use is a Mac Mini right here. Standard M1 Mac Mini. I paid a little bit more money to upgrade the RAM to 16 gigabytes and I've been very happy with that. It's practically silent, so when you're recording there's no computer fans or anything like that going off. So highly recommend that if you're looking for a computer to record with and do some music related things. The downside to that is if you buy a Mac Mini, then you've got to buy all the other accessories. So I've got a Logitech wireless keyboard, Logitech wireless mouse here, and I've had to buy a separate screen as well, a separate monitor, which is a 27-inch LG monitor, which looks really good. It's not quite as clear as, say, an iMac monitor or anything like that, but still looks pretty good to me. So the audio interface which I use is this Focusrite 2i2 right here. I've had this for a long time now and it's okay, it does the job. 2 inputs, you definitely, if you want to get an audio interface, it's definitely worth getting one with 2 inputs, even if you think you only need one. But at some point I might upgrade that, because I would prefer to have a USB mixer in some ways, because that would allow me not only to control the gain of each input, but also the overall volume and balance. And you can add things like reverb and compression on a mixer. And if you do that using an interface like this, and you've got to do it through software, which is okay, but not ideal if you want to use it for live teaching stuff like what I do. Beyond that, this shotgun mic right here is what I use for all my live lessons, and I like using this. I forget the name of it, but I'll put it in the description or on the screen. I like using this because when I'm sat teaching, doing lessons, it gets a pretty good sound, and unlike a condenser or a dynamic mic, it's not in your face, right? So it's just there, but it's not too intrusive. You do get a great result using a mic closer to your mouth, but I find it quite annoying when it's constantly in your face all the time. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. And there's a little stand that I use to have it to the desk, so if I'm not teaching and I just want to sit here and do some work or something like that, I can move it completely out of the way there, and it's not interfering with what I'm doing at all. On the desk, tuner, snap clip-on tuner, a couple of the purple plectrums that I like to use. I like this light here. This is great for teaching and doing live streams. It's from Elgato and it's very expensive for what it was, to be honest, and you could probably find something a little bit cheaper, but yeah, it does get the result, and you can control the brightness of the light from your phone, so it is useful for meetings and Zoom lessons and things like that. Moving on here towards the right hand side of the desk, Telecaster, Rode 1 Telecaster, and I've just got the Cube amp at the minute. That's the amp that I've been using a lot recently, just because I do a little bit of general guitar teaching still, so it is useful to have the effects on. But that amp is one that I really like using for jazz as well. It sounds great with loads of my guitars, so that's what's over there. And then at the other side of the room, I've got my old Japanese Strat currently out at the minute, and there's my old Mini Brute right there. And I'll show you kind of what I do for the general filming, for the general videos, as well as some of the specific software which I use. So in regards to the software that I use on the Mac, there's a few pieces of software. The DAW, which I like to use, is GarageBand, very simple to use, very effective. I've had no problems with that. I'll sometimes use one of the drummer loops on GarageBand because I find it better than some of the drum loops that you find on things like Aerial Pro. So what I tend to do for a lot of backing tracks at the minute is I'll export some audio, but if I do export audio from Aerial Pro, it usually is just bass, sometimes piano. That company isn't particularly great either, but the drums, I don't really like how the drums sound on Aerial Pro, so I try to avoid that. However, this is a really useful piece of software, as I'm sure you'll know, just to be able to practice songs, and I've done a few videos on that, so I won't go into too much detail about that. So GarageBand, Aerial Pro. For all the notation that I do, I use a program called Musascore, and I've got the latest version, but I prefer the older one. And I found this to be a very good piece of software. I used to use Sibelius, but then that got quite expensive with a subscription model. So this is freeware, free to use. There's a bit of a learning curve, but I'm really happy with the results that I get from using Musascore. The other piece of software that I like to use is one called Neck Diagrams, and that's really useful for creating diagrams for scales. For chords, I tend to just use Musascore. Occasionally I use Neck Diagrams, but I really like Neck Diagrams. One of the main reasons is the scale generator function. So if I want to generate a scale right there, you can do that and it will map out all the fingerings for a scale that you want. So that's really useful for me making educational content, and perhaps useful as well if you're wanting to learn some things about teaching or just for your own personal practice. In regards for my teaching for the live streams, I use a program called OBS, which is kind of like some broadcasting software, which I used to use to record the videos, but I don't tend to do that anymore. In terms of the actual teaching itself, I use Zoom mostly, occasionally Skype, but I definitely prefer using Zoom. I've just realised that I didn't really tell you how I record the guitar. So sometimes I use this condenser mic, which is in front of my cube, which is a P120, I believe is the name of the condenser mic. It's not that expensive, and I have a Rode mic, which is a little bit nicer sounding, but I think that this mic connects to this desktop stand. This mic stand is actually meant for a desktop, but I didn't really want a big amp stand taking up lots of space because there isn't a great deal of space here. So this desktop stand, I think it's about £15, $20, doesn't take up much space, and it's really great for recording the amp. I can just leave that mic set up all the time, so I can use that for recording or for lessons, and that works really well. However, sometimes I do think that the sound can be as better or just as good when I use a Focusrite. So sometimes I'll connect the guitar directly into that and just use one of the amp simulators on GarageBand. I can't remember which one, but if you're interested in that, I can share that information with you. In case anybody's interested in film stuff, video stuff, I've just quickly set up this video camera right here, which is a Sony ZV-E10. I think that's what the name of that camera is, which is a nice 4K camera. Very easy to use. I used to have another Sony A5100 before that, and this one is much better, especially in darker situations, and the light is much better on that. I'm really happy with that. And I bought this shotgun mic, which attaches to the top, which is really good. It does a good job, and it makes my process much easier rather than syncing audio and video all the time, which, you know, that is a good result, but it can be quite time consuming if you have to produce quite a lot of videos. So I'm really happy with how that shotgun mic sounds. I don't know if it sounds as good as my other one. This is an XLR shotgun mic, so I do think that one does sound a little bit better. So maybe someday I would like to be able to use an XLR shotgun mic. Maybe probably the best sound that I get actually when I'm talking about making a very good, well-produced video is probably using an XLR shotgun mic, plugging the guitar directly into the Focusrite and using this for video. I used to use lots of lights, and I've still got a few USB lights, and I've got the Elgato light behind me, as I've already said, but a lot of the time I like to use the natural daylight here as well. I find that much nicer to work in rather than having the blind pulled down and working in the darkness all the time. So that's what the video production looks like for me. Okay, so I hope that this video gives you a few ideas on what you can do to record. If you've got a spare space that you can convert into a music recording studio, and there's a few things that I'd ultimately like to do, or a few problems with this room in particular. One being that the walls are very, very thick. So for example, if I'm recording now, basically with the wall to the back of my head, the sound's not too bad. But when I'm recording with my mouth facing towards that wall, it can sound very, very bad. And I've experimented with different things over the years to try and combat that. Like, for example, like putting pillows on the wall to try and soften the sound. And that does make a big difference. And as you can see in this particular room, the problem is that you get lots of light on this side of your face, but this side is quite dark. So you've got to get the angle just right to kind of balance out all the light on your face. I used to have some of those big soft lights with the bulbs in, and I was really happy with how those video results came out, but equally they're very cumbersome, they get very hot, and they take up a lot of space in a small room like this. And equally, this is a room that I like to play guitar in and enjoy myself in, and if it looks like a film studio with lights and microphones and wires everywhere, it's not particularly pleasant to be in. So I'm ultimately always trying to keep the balance between something that feels good to be in and something that will give me the best video production results, if that makes sense. So yeah, you know, ultimately I would like to, as I was saying earlier, maybe have an XLR shotgun mic that I could use for the video, connected up all the time, and maybe have my guitar plugged in, and you know, have other things like some lights and things like that. But equally, I'm really happy with what I've got. I'm fortunate to have this stuff. I accumulated most of it over lockdown slowly, you know, because there wasn't much to do otherwise, and that's how I built this setup up. But you know, as I've said in other videos, there's nothing wrong with just getting started like I am right now using your phone.